each other?
About what? Accountability and participation?
Anything. No, about anything.
Anything, okay. Last night we went to this Buckingham Palace. Hassan took me, and it was freezing. And on the way, he told me, buy a cap. I said, no, I'm not going to buy now. And then, you know, it was so cold that I could not talk. Yeah, and he was saying, how are you? How are you?
I hope we don't get sick or something, eh?
So we managed to, yeah. Because in Kabul also there's snowfall and cold. So, but it was awesome and awful as well.
Something awesome and awful. You don't get those every day. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Within that discussion, I want us to look at accountability indicators, and I'm glad there's quite a few heads in here that could help kind of maybe move the discussion forward a little bit, because this is something new for me, for our team that we're working on, and I want to pick your brains on it. And basically the next thing is looking at quick wins, mainstreaming accountability. How can we make it, make small but easy steps? What are some of the easier things to start with, maybe, from your experience? And I'll bring some experience and what I see and hear from other countries. So once we take a look at that, and then I want us to look at our personal plans, and this is most relevant for our country colleagues, but also for our colleagues here as well, to look at some sort of planning for 2013. And we'll end with a quick discussion on how will we keep in touch and what support needs you might have, and so forth. We want to have lunch at 3 o'clock. We'll be going to a Turkish restaurant together, but we need to end. We have this room until 2, but before we leave for lunch, obviously we need to empty the room, so we might need your help to quickly clean up before we head for the restaurant. And of course, before that, we want to have a quick look at the week and talk about what do you take with you from the week as a short evaluation, if that's all right. Does that sound okay? So,
did you say we're finishing at 3 o'clock?
at 1, did I say 3?
Oh, no, I heard you. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I may have said 3. I may have. So, one of the quick wins, I think, of mainstreaming accountability is ensuring that it features in our proposals and budgets. And for that, we have put together an excerpt and a series of budget appraisal questions. So, if I would like you to read that long paragraph for me. Tell me what you think about it. Emergency proposals and concepts. Different. There's that one. We're not getting there yet. We haven't started the indicator discussion.
Oh, so
We have a
where are
separate
we?
discussion on that.
Where?
We're just looking at the excerpt
first
now.
part, no.
Yeah, the first one. We'll have a separate discussion. Thank you for that. That's very important. Yeah.
I was just thinking, I mean, this is like the ideal. So if you have a country like Myanmar, you could put this into a proposal like no qualms, because they've already got that culture established. But if it was a country that hadn't done it before, there would have to be like serious thought about how long the project was and what kind of resources were available for this. Because when you unpack it, it's lots and lots of different activities, which are great. But I'm just thinking, being negative as always, like I'm just thinking of the budget implications and the time.
Okay. Yeah. yeah, it kind of walks through what needs to be in place. It may not be too many different things, but because I think, again, a lot of this can be tagged along to the regular meetings and the MNE, and I think, you know, all of that. But I thought, well, I mean, I'm not sure whether once we put this into the project proposal, it will ensure that these things will happen. I really am not sure about that. But when I speak with, you know, Jonathan, who is our regional business development person in Asia, he says, yes, once these things go into the proposal, you know, we can be held to account on delivering on those things, so it will be a very important step. So in that sense, I think it's, you know, I thought, okay, I'm just going to sit down and write, according to each program step, what needs to happen. And of course, once the country office reads this, they might go like, oh my God, you know, and they might want to change it. And I have no control over that. But, you know, I see your point. Do you think that once it's in the proposal, it will happen?
I'd worry about putting it in a proposal without having the systems already functioning effectively. I think you could get yourself into quite a difficult situation by making these kind of very specific commitments and then not having the capacity to actually do them. I think it would be better if it was driven from the other perspective. In an ideal world, like in reality, we'll probably do a bit of both. Like people who are proposal writing will say, can you put any of this in? And, you know, it'd be a compromise. But yeah, I think it should more be driven from what systems the country office has in place and how they are being more accountable to beneficiaries. From that would be my perspective.
And of course, the other thing is, you know, this is a separate section versus, you know, coming throughout the proposal. That's another thing. But in terms of a guide like this is the only thing we can offer, and hopefully, you know, kind of see if it's useful. We have, we will communicate this to proposal writing of team here, and also it will be shared with our breakthrough countries to see if it's of any use.
I think it's really useful as like sort of like a checklist or something like that to help you identify some language coming through in a proposal.
Good, that's good feedback.
Koji, would you envisage people using the whole paragraph, or is it you would take the most relevant bits for the proposal and you'll put it together?
I mean, I don't know, like maybe just the second paragraph in its own, maybe some, you know, people don't want to use the first one or something, but it's really the second paragraph that lays it out. So I would like to see the second paragraph not broken and used in its entirety. But then again, you know, there are concerns about capacity to actually implement. Then people will have to take bits out and make it a bit more generic. This is actually very specifically talking about we will do this, we will do that, and then we will do this. You know, it's kind of really making promises. So I can see people kind of playing with it. But I thought it's also almost like a sensitization tool. Whoever's reading this, it's like, oh, so this is what's accountability. In a way, you know, we will do this at that stage, and then we'll go and do that, and then we'll link it with the MNE system, and then, you know, we'll hold learning and reflection with the partners, and, you know, rather than a generic blah 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 blah. But you know, I guess we just see what people will need to make of it. I'd be really interested in your experience, whether you use it, whether you change it. Just drop me a line and say this is how I put it in. And for the meal one, I don't know, did you have a chance to look at it? I mean, they did kind of a nice job. It's been a while since I looked at it, but it lays out tasks, outputs, so you could almost, there isn't indicators, so you couldn't really take and put it into your log frame, but you could. It might be a starting point for you to do it. It's like a work plan, a meal work plan. Regular project supervision, strength of accountability, ex post evaluation, appraisal of future programming. So, this one. Do you have it, Emily? Do you have this?
Yeah.
My comment is not about this one, but about the budgeting. For information sharing, I think sometimes we can also use the visibility lines under different projects.
Absolutely.
So it's good that not to just to have some sort of discussion with the program or the project team, and then we can use those visibility lines for information sharing material.
Absolutely.
So it can save some money.
Yeah, I guess for me the question that comes up from these materials, which I think are excellent, super useful, is when we work for some of our bigger programs like the Girls Education Challenge, where we end up sort of completely outsourcing M&E to a large partner agency. How we ensure that these principles are also reflected in the design that they create, which to some extent we have a little bit less control over. I mean, on one sense, it's easier when you're working with local partners because, again, there's sort of that power dynamic. They're expecting you to provide guidance. But when we're working with people like Coffee International or Oxford Policy Management, they have their own set of ways of doing things. And so it's just, I think important for us on those bigger programs to make sure that we're working with those partners as well to kind of educate them in our core values and making sure that in the design that they come up with, it incorporates these types of indicators as well.
Yeah. If we are to move on to the budgeting for accountability thing, so on this one pager, we put in questions for appraising your budget for accountability. So this is for after a draft budget is in place, whoever's looking at the budget at country level, or also for colleagues who are sitting here at head office level to look at whether we've adequately resourced for accountability. So for this one, we actually have a how-to. Do you have your blue folders with you? May not. You don't. You didn't bring it. You didn't bring it. You didn't bring it.
Yeah, I bring.
You bring it. It doesn't really make sense anyway, because a lot of the different elements of accountability fit very nicely into information, visibility, into your M&E, into your activities, into your various lines. So what this tool does is it helps you calculate per benchmark what sort of costs you might incur, yeah? So for information sharing, the budget line that we suggest is communications, publications, branding, visibility, what have you, yeah? And some of the things you might want to think about is designing, translating, publishing, distributing, child-friendly reports, plans, leaflets, posters, staff code of conduct, posters that I've been showing examples of, and other key information. And then a lot of countries actually go ahead and buy community notice boards. So these are some of the things that you might want to think about under information sharing. Once you've consulted with the community and have a sense of what sort of materials you might need. And these are some examples from different country programs for how much things might cost. So, you might have already an idea in your country office. And that's basically, helping you cost it for your country office for that benchmark. And the second thing, this is holding meetings and other ideas might be there. And then participation. The budget line is obviously activities, right? It goes right into the direct costs, the heart of the budget in here. Travel or materials or venue hire, so it can be regular meetings, travel, venue hire, lunch, set up ongoing costs for children clubs and communities, involving children in M&E, for example, and then you cost your activities here. And then complaints handling. So the budget lines for that are staffing, training, activities, materials, or communications, right? So you might need to train your partner staff. You might need to hold, meetings on that with the community to explain how the feedback mechanism works. Materials for the mechanism. So is it a poster you're doing? Is it a feedback form you're creating and printing? Maybe you're putting up boxes. Maybe you're setting up a hotline. How much does it cost to have the hotline in Somalia?
Phone set is around $100 to $200, and then the airtime is maximum 500 to 1,000 USD
Per month.
per month.
Okay. So you see, we've got those figures. It would be nice to actually put them in here, so people have a sense. So just costing them here. Staff competency. So now this is about whether if we need and we can afford to have staff specific for accountability. It might be full-time, it might be part-time, it might be staffing, training, activities, or communication. So appointing a dedicated staff, training staff, program staff or partner staff on accountability and participation. If we have not somebody in the office who has been to an investigations training, for example, our safeguarding focal point is not capable enough to run these things for us. And if this is a priority for the country office, that might be something, if you can budget for it, maybe you can get away with it here. Production of induction materials, so you just kind of custom here. Learning and improvement, so this benchmark falls under M&E stuff, so activities, M&E, budget, so mid-year, end-of-year workshops with staff, partners, children, community representatives on the program. Publishing success stories and case studies can come under this. And then the last benchmark, establishing and delivering on commitments. Assessing accountability activities with staff, workshops to review existing accountability framework and revising it, and things like that. So just to make you think about all these different bits that you might want to do throughout the life of the program. As you work your way through and look at the examples and think about how much things might cost, and also, how long the program is. How tight is the budget? How tight is the time frame? All of these things. That's why it's very difficult to say put 3%, put 5%, or else. It's really difficult.
Because this question normally they ask from me, that how much is budget for this M&E. So normally I say the 3 to 10%. But then they say that, how much budget is remaining for the program activities, then how much is the set for salaries and for overhead, the administrative cost.
Yeah, it's always a negotiation. It's always tight.
Yeah.
I know it. It's always tight. But some of these things don't need to cost too much. As long as, we need to think about really being strategic. If we have a small chunk that's available, do we put it onto hiring a staff member, or do we put it onto, production of materials, or just setting up a complaints mechanism? It's really for, what will give us the most return, what will enable us to do more. It's really that sort of a calculation, isn't it always? This is the how-to guide. And here are the appraisal questions. So once you've got the budget, somebody said, well, can you take a look and see if we've budgeted enough for accountability? So for information sharing, have you budgeted for resources that will enable to share information with children and communities in your partner organizations? So consider allocating resources for posters, leaflets, information boards, child-friendly materials. Participation. Have you budgeted adequately to enable participation of children, adults, and partners in in design, implementation, and M&E, yeah? Complaints handling. Have you got enough money in there for trainings of staff, for consultation meetings, and materials for the complaints mechanism? And then the dedicated staff. Do you need dedicated staff, full-time or part-time, of somebody to be able to do all these activities? Because if these are not there, it's just not going to happen. And then it's somebody, everybody thinking, we're already loaded and this is extra work and it will fall through the cracks. So we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure from the very beginning. And I know that this is a kind of a part of a longer journey in the sector. About 10 years ago, nobody budgeted for M&E. Is that right or not? You know? M&E is, barely now getting full-fledged into our proposals with the whole results agenda, with the push from the donors. We're really starting to make, space in our budgets for M&E activities. But it was barely there some years ago. And this is probably going to be the same. If the donors are serious about this, they will start asking us about, well, how are you going to ensure accountability to communities, and how does that reflect in your proposal? And this is some of the, hopefully, the thinking that can guide us, put it into there. If, so I would love it if you took this excerpt and the budget questions and shared it basically with everybody who's involved in proposal writing in your country offices, and see where that takes us. Yeah. Any comments? Any thoughts? Okay. So the next thing is me picking your brains about accountability indicators. So in here I put some indicators already, but if I were to come to you and said, if we want to suggest to our country offices, to our colleagues here, 2 or 3 indicators on accountability, what should those be? If we want to monitor the accountability of our programs as part of our M&E kind of frameworks and plans, what are the things that we need to be looking at for a particular project? I want something easy and something that people will say, all right, we can do it. Because I know that, M&E is already a challenge. We're struggling with robust systems. We're struggling with regular monitoring in most cases. And there is generally a ton of list of indicators that we come up with, which in the end, we're not always able to collect information on. So I don't want to give people a long list of things in addition to everything else they need to follow up with. I want to give people really 2 to 3 things that will kind of help us keep an eye on, are we doing okay in terms of accountability in this project? So.
Do you want us to suggest?
Yes. It's.
I was wondering if you could add something around, a percentage of children who say they felt consulted or involved, or whatever your measure, whichever one you were aiming for. Were you aiming for consultation or involvement, or whatever, something like that? That makes sense.
Yeah, I was also thinking along those lines, like looking at the level of satisfaction with the SC accountability system, and then disaggregating that in terms of communities, men and women, children, down and boys.
Level of satisfaction with what?
With the Save the Children accountability system.
With the system?
Accountability mechanism.
Or with the program?
With the both. But also the system, because we are trying to test how effective it is and what.
With the mechanism. So, but then this will be about a particular mechanism.
Yeah.
So the feedback, are you happy with the feedback mechanism?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Whether it resolves their issues and they're satisfied. And then desegregating that, because for me desegregation is the most important, just to know within the groups, is it the parents who are satisfied? If it's the parents, is it the mothers or the fathers? Is it the children? Is it the girls or the boys? Or
Yeah.
different?
Yeah, no, absolutely. For all the indicators, that
Yeah.
goes without saying, yeah? Well, what did you say?
Sorry, I said percent of children who say that they were consulted by the project or involved in the project, or however you would want to word it.
They were involved?
Yeah. Or I guess you could get more specific in terms of they were involved in planning the project, they were involved in decision making, they were involved in reviewing the project. So
I think along the lines of the
yeah,
child
I was
thing,
thinking
child
along
participation.
exactly, yeah. The sort of framework of the different levels of participation.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of what kind of tool you developed for that though. Because obviously you're not going to involve 100% of the children you're working with in planning, because if you're working with 500, it's not possible. So I don't know. When you try and think it through logically, I can't see the tool that you would use to measure that you would get an accurate response to involved in.
Maybe activities, because you could have different groups of children that were involved in activities that you would then do an exercise to find out how they felt about their sort of level of voice within that activity. So maybe that's a better word than project, let's say.
I think also in M&E you don't have to measure 100%. You have to
Yeah.
purposely sampling or whatever sampling you're doing, and out of that sample, there are many methods you can use qualitatively, like focus group discussion, one-to-one interviews, or case studies. You can use quantitative indicators as well. Just counting how many children are saying this, how many are saying that, and then try and balance the picture with the perceptions and attitudes to that.
Okay.
Percentage of community members segregated by gender, age, children who had adequate information about project program.
Community members who
Had adequate information about program, project, organization.
who report
Yeah,
that they have
they
adequate
have
information.
yeah.
How would you define adequate?
We will ask them set of questions like rating 1, 2, 3, 4, and took a random sample or maybe some sampling, and then
But then wouldn't the problem be that we would have to determine what we felt was
So-
adequate information?
Yeah.
So then it gets
Maybe
a bit
we
tricky.
say that key information, and we can define what key information is.
yes,
But it's still top down.
Yes.
But then I guess if you link that with the complaints mechanism, what if you had both of
first
those
can I
indicators? and it-
explain this? I mean, when I was referring to this adequate information, in the start we can discuss with the community that what information they need. Then when at the start of the project, if we agree that this is the information that should be shared with the community, and then at the end we measure that. This is at the start we decided that this information will be shared with the community member, and now we are doing against this. So how many of these say that they have this information?
Yeah.
This is what I
Can we say that number or percent of children or adults who actively participated in planning, design, monitoring and evaluation?
This is the same thing.
And then I see one indicator. There are two indicators. One is the number of complaints, and then number of complaints responded to. Can we say percent? If we say percent of complaint responded, like
To,
yeah. It will give us the like both. Yeah,
Percentage
yeah.
of complaints.
It might be interesting to have something that somehow looks at the quality of the response.
Yeah.
Like you could have something like, it's not just about percent of complaints responded to, but you could follow up with people afterwards and say, did you feel that the response resolved your issue with the project? Or somehow to measure something like that. I'm not quite sure how to word that into an indicator, but
Your satisfaction.
Yeah, the satisfaction.
Isn't it? It comes to this, isn't it?
Level of satisfaction.
well, that's
not
like
the
a
project.
numerical measure, isn't it? Of like a number of people. That you have 100 people and then the percent of complaints that were responded to. It's like measuring your.
No, this level of satisfaction with the project.
Or about the feedback mechanism.
CRM.
I guess I was thinking more about the actual response
Oh,
itself.
I see.
So to measure whether beneficiaries were happy with how and what the response was.
To their complaint. Or
Yeah,
the
to
emergency.
their complaint.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But,
Level of satisfaction with the feedback mechanism.
I'm wondering whether it would be good though to expand that to include level of satisfaction with the staff, because we were talking about kind of staff attitudes and things, so that could be one element of an indicator on that. I don't know how you'd word it.
Yeah, it's like on different levels. So one, perhaps the time frame in which it was responded to, the staff that handled it. Like there can be lots of different ways that we could measure how satisfied you were.
Yeah.
I'm also now thinking in the LFA levels, for example, how the logical framework of analysis, how we need to sort of differentiate what are our output level indicators, outcome level, and impact level.
Yeah.
Because for me, if I think about this in education terms, my ultimate impact, I would want to see why am I doing accountability in the first place. So I would try to link it to the impact of what I'm doing. What is how has this impacted on the learning outcomes for girls and boys, for example? How has it impacted on the transition rates and employability even in post-evaluation?
I think the satisfaction with the project or the program is your impact level, isn't it, for accountability? Did we deliver what we said, promised,
Not just the
set out to
satisfaction,
deliver?
but the change. Because impact is the impact.
Yeah,
So what change has happened in that community
yeah, yeah.
based on our target impact level?
Yeah. Whereas these are more the output level, isn't it?
Yeah, because most
You know,
donors
the level
increasingly now
there.
want outcome level indicators.
Yeah.
They're
So
not
let's
interested in-
let's try to look at it this way. For accountability, if we are to develop one indicator on information sharing, one on participation, one on complaints handling, and one on overall satisfaction or change or delivery of the program. Yeah. For information sharing, shall we? If we go with something like that, number of community members who report that they have key information. How do we measure that? I've kind of, let me see. We've been having some discussions around this, and I think here's where we are. For information sharing, so percentage of community members reporting that they have adequate information about our organization and the program. Again, the problem with adequate information, and I guess this has to be percentage of community members sampled, not every. Is that easy enough? Is that doable? Will people want to look at this as an indicator?
I think it has to be, like Hassan had a really good explanation, it has to be accompanied by that description that at the beginning of the project you agree with community members what the key information they want is, because otherwise people will question the adequate.
Yeah. Yeah. basically putting this in a survey and explain when we say adequate information, we mean X, Y, Z.
Yes, in the evaluation or in the maybe midterm evaluation or the final evaluation, we can give the same document which we developed at the start of the program, that this is the information that we are going to share, or this is what we agreed with the community, and then they will measure against all those, points which we mentioned, and then they might take some random sample or whatever, and then they report on this. That how much percentage of community members have responded, that yes, these all have been shared with them.
Can we aid into boys, girls, men, women, and disabled, and language?
Sorry?
In the first indicator, like this is desegregated for boys, girls, men, and women, and then disabled and language as well.
And all categories.
Disabled
Yeah.
and minorities maybe.
Disabled and language.
Minorities, yeah, maybe.
Ah, yeah.
Language.
Disabled minorities or vulnerable group.
Minorities.
Yeah, minorities, yeah.
Minorities.
And so
But how do you do the sampling?
Because
Then
you
just go and
if in a
purposive
yeah.
sampling and you talk to.
Because if we add these three things, then we have this information about the community. Like we know disabled groups, we know minorities. That depends to project or the context in which we are working. If we have, then we can add. If we don't have, but just for this indicator, we should not include it.
But
Yeah,
the most
but-
important as well is the economic groups like poor households.
Yeah,
Vulnerable
it's-
groups we can say for
Because they never get
No, but
involved
it's
in
not
that process.
reflected in the indicator. If we, for example, we have interviewed only the rich groups, but indicator is satisfied.
Mm.
It's, we are getting the reports.
Yeah.
We don't know that we have consulted the poor or
The
not.
poor.
Yeah.
we
So
have to
are
look for
you
that.
suggesting random sampling, or are you suggesting what is it purposive? I'm not a many person, but are you suggesting
what Nasir is
purposive?
saying to what I understand from the discussion, Nasir is saying that we should also include boys, girls, men, women.
Inclusive, like make this indicator more inclusive.
Yeah, and to add minorities group as well, or maybe the vulnerable groups, some word like this, so that when we measure this, we also reach to those people, like maybe FSL beneficiaries. We only do not target just boys, girls. We also reach the
No,
poorest.
absolutely. I understand that. My question to you is, how are you, if we write some guidance about how to measure this indicator, what should I write about sampling?
I think it's stratified learning.
Is that what it is called?
No, I think we should say that this should be sample. It should not be a census. And when somebody will decide the sample, it will be based on the population, resources, everything. So they will decide what sampling methodology they want to use. So I think it will be good for us just to say that here we mean a sample, not the whole
You mean
population.
a random sample?
We need not to say the random, because maybe they can take the purpose sample, or maybe they cover the whole population. We just say it can be sample, or it should.
And then you need to further.
If we can
define-
aid in the indicator percent of like sample community members from different groups.
Yes,
Yeah.
what Nasir is saying, what I understand, like what you mentioned, I was thinking, like if I'm working in FSL project, when we say boys and girls, men, women, definitely if my project is targeting poor groups, so I will go to them. Why I will go to rich people?
No, but you know,
who are
for
not our
for
target?
indicator, we should like it's your understanding. My understanding is that, for example, how can I know from the indicator that this indicator has targeted the poor groups? There should be some wording in the indicator that represent that this indicator is inclusive.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're suggesting percentage of
Percent of different community groups, or yeah.
Or could you make it
Categories.
segregate for boys, girls, men, women, other
Yes,
marginalised
other
groups as
other
appropriate to your
marginalised
project?
is that okay?
Yeah, disabled as well.
Yeah? Okay, so I
Instead of
understand
saying
that.
other, it's good to spell them out. Poor, people with disabilities. minorities, those three, and say we are not measuring any other beyond that, because that gives you a picture. And then for the poor households, there is always need to define the threshold of what we mean by poor, because in projects we have this habit of saying we are targeting the poor anyway. And I'll give you an example of the poor in a pastoralist region in Eastern Africa, for example. From our eyes, we think the Maasais are very poor people because they just dress in a sheet and they have cattle and they have no money. But within their communities, there is a threshold for who is poor in that community. If you have more than 1,000 cattle, for example, and 10 camels and things like that, you're not poor. If you have 10 cattle in your household, you're not poor. But there are families who have only one cattle.
Yeah,
So in that threshold, we need to define
okay.
below $5.
Point taken.
So can you just leave that other part open? Because some of those things might not.
Yes.
For
Context
me,
specific.
minority households.
Exactly. And disabled, if we don't have
There are
any
other
disabled
issues
group,
that-
so it will
Okay,
add
so
some
I
extra
add
pressure.
something like, kind of vulnerable groups, minority vulnerable groups and disabled at the end of that. Okay.
I also
Yeah.
think maybe not for like if there's only one indicator, but it'd be also interesting for information sharing to disaggregate it by literacy levels, I think, because then it would show whether the organisation has just given out written information.
Important
if they've
point,
actually
yeah.
sat down with people.
Very
Can I also ask, is this about information they have received or about information that they know? So is it a test of, is it measuring whether they're remembering what we've told them or what they've received, or is it whether they've actually received it? Yeah.
Good point. Which is more important for us?
It's gonna depend on the value judgment of the people we're asking, though, isn't it? So we're not going to say, if they say I don't feel like they know anything about the project, you have to mark that they feel like they don't know anything, even though you know that you gave them like a leaflet and a poster and had a discussion.
Because our staff will always say, oh, we told them, we did this,
Yeah.
we did that. It's the effectiveness of that we want to measure. Whether they know is the sign of the effectiveness of what we've done. So we're measuring whether they know. So I think in that sense it's in line. Whether they have adequate information about the project is what we want to know.
But we won't be testing them. We won't be measuring what they know. We'll be measuring what they feel like they know.
Yes, their perception of how much information they have and whether it's adequate for them.
I would change it then, whether they know instead of have adequate.
But it says
They know
reporting.
adequate.
I think it might be interesting to ask them it the other way around and say, did you have any unmet questions about the project? And then you might get something a little bit richer out in terms of getting the actual questions that they had. And then you can maybe use that to feed back into the project rather than asking how they felt about the information, like actually finding out what they didn't know. Or you could do both, maybe.
You could have a checklist and just leave the adequate. Like, did you receive any written materials? Did you read them? Did you understand them? Did you have any verbal discussions with our group? Because I'm assuming whoever is going to do this is not only the internal evaluators, but also when external evaluators come, they will want to see what kind of information and things like that.
Yes, I think, there might be a number of ways of information sharing, but for us, this will measure. Maybe we have given oral speeches, material, literature, whatever. But if they are saying, and if they know, we are measuring them through this indicator. And about the point about literacy or illiteracy, I think that will be also covered within this indicator. Because the main perception or whatever, if they come to know through any means, it is saying that yes, they are reporting, yes, they have information. And the rest of the things are only the medium or the mechanism or the channel that we have used. So we might not mention here in the indicator.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this indicator remains as it is. It's
Yes.
a good indicator, but
But
have a
behind it.
checklist with
Yes.
all those things.
And I think that to include in the checklist, like you say, just
Yeah.
scope for them to say, and what else would you like to have, receive further information, so that the definition of adequate is still open to their interpretation.
Okay, good, thank you. Moving on, participation. Percentage of targeted community members who report having meaningfully participated, that means adhering to our standards, in design implementation And then we have another one, targeted community members who report having influenced program decisions. Now, this was basically looking at too many things. I'm not happy with this, you know, you will tell me anyway. Meaningfully participated. So the indicator tries to look at the quality of participation and the scope of participation in terms of it covering design and implementation, yeah? So trying to look at two things. And then this is about influencing program decisions. This is again something about, you know, us kind of giving power to the community and trying to look at that. Can we measure this? My first question. Is there a problem with that? Yeah?
I have a question. When we say meaningful participation, what I understand from meaningful participation is they are able to influence us, isn't it? Then why do we have two indicators?
When we say meaningful participation, we talk about inclusive, safe, voluntary, all those 9 standards, yeah? So part of it is about influencing, but it's about all those different standards. And that's why I think, you know, kind of jamming it into one indicator. I don't know, I need to kind of hear some feedback about that.
I think it's a good indicator because normally what we do is we do baselines for programs and we design different tools for data collection for children based on the requirements and for adults as well. Then we calculate a sample size for data collection, and that sample size is based on the population of the target community. So we can easily say that we have interviewed about 5% of the community or 10% of the community or children, boys and girls. So my understanding is that this is a good indicator.
Okay.
So just in terms of the equivalence of defining meaningful, but maybe so they might feel that it was safe and that it was voluntary, but they might not feel it was particularly abusive for whatever reason. So you could potentially measure it like that.
When it says targeted community members, are they targeted by the project or targeted for participation activities?
That's a very good question. So that's something that's been raised. Targeted for projects.
Just for consistency, so the first indicator, because it just says percentage of community members, I think our assumption was sampled community members. So why would participation be what seems to be all community members instead of a sample? Or is that just semantics?
Sorry?
So by having the word targeted, it kind of suggests that you want to include all rather than a sample. So it might be worth just taking it out.
That out. Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I was just wondering if it might be interesting to have something internal focused on like the staff who are involved in implementing. So something like around their perceptions of the accountability mechanisms. So percentage of staff who state that accountability mechanisms have improved the quality of their programming, or you know, something like that, or something more nuanced than that could actually bring out reasons. I just think it might be interesting. Well,
do you hear from staff?
Yeah. While this accountability sort of system is being put into programming, it might be interesting to keep getting that information about how staff feel about it, what their perceptions are, what they think the constraints are, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's all these, what I want to do is actually I want to put together a menu of indicators in addition to these, like, you know, 2 or 3 key ones that, you know, we want people to kind of go to first. If they have space for 2 or 3, we want them to go to 2 or 3 key ones. But then in addition, there's so many different things that we can look at that could be actually very useful for countries, for programs that have the capacity and are interested in finding out about these questions. the one piece of feedback we got on the influencing thing, it was that, you know, people might not actually know if and how they were able to influence. So they may not be able to comment. You know, I participated, I said something, but I don't know if it changed anything.
I think that's, again, where it might be interesting to have a staff focus indicator, because it might be more like asking staff how they use the feedback. Has feedback from participants of the program influence your decision making, and then how. I like the qualitative points as well. I think they're quite rich.
But then I think that if community members have influenced program decisions but aren't even aware of that, then that does show a flaw in the accountability mechanism, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But also, having said that, like, it's not like you're going to.
They will be able to know, but I know that in other cases people will not be able to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess an example in humanitarian programming would be like you receive feedback on the contents of a household kit. Like, beneficiaries who've given that feedback wouldn't know that they'd influenced the kit, but it's actually a really critical use of the feedback that they've given. I guess that's how I would understand it. So that then I wouldn't say it's necessary that they would know themselves that they'd influenced that decision. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I think that you know, these indicators also tells us that they got feedback and they know that they have influenced the program decisions. So this indicator already has that component of feedback integrated into this. Yeah. So if they know that and they report that they have influenced the program design, so they have got the feedback.
Yeah,
That's my understanding.
That's if it's come through the complaints and response mechanism. I guess I was thinking more if it had come through other forms of monitoring, then you wouldn't have that direct link with the beneficiary. But if it comes through the complaints and response mechanism, then I think you would.
Roger, can I ask, you obviously seem to have reservations of putting the meaningful participation and the program design and implementation into the same indicator.
I don't know. I mean, I want to ask the mini colleagues whether we can measure it. How do we measure it is my question, and whether it's going to turn people off. And I know that we have a global indicator on it, so we don't want to necessarily, you know, ask for something else. We want to be in line with the global indicator, which they are already measuring. But the problem with that is the global indicator is measured at country level, isn't it?
No, it's project.
It's projects that and then aggregated. So okay, so it could help actually at project level if we were to suggest a participation indicator that could help feed into that global indicator calculation. So
I think the this indicator is not relevant to the 4 or 5 month projects, like, you know, the emergency projects.
yeah,
This influencing decisions.
the second, yeah, okay, yeah, no, we can see that. But they will drop that. But you know, if we have 2 for participation, they can take 1. And is that so? What were you saying, Zoe? Sorry.
I was actually going to ask why you have it as an option, why you've compounded it into one. Those sort of like 2 questions, but I think you sort of answered it with your talk about the global outcome indicator.
And also why of implementation and not evaluation.
Yeah, that was the other thing. So it's, yeah, we could add that. That was another piece of feedback that came in. But isn't it looking at where too many things in one indicator?
I'm thinking of the tool, and it's kind of bringing up more questions in my mind, because if you're saying meaningfully participative meets the criterion, would you then give the country office the flexibility to choose what kind of criteria they wanted to do, and then they'd have to do that for each stage, and then that would have to be linked to their activity plan, and all of this would have to be decided at the beginning of the project, and they'd have to have a lot of capacity in it. So there are lots of issues that come up.
Absolutely, that's it.
But it could be
That's very
possible.
helpful. So now the global indicator tries to do that. There's a form, there's a tool, and three 3 standards have been already prioritized for the country offices. They don't get a choice. It's safe, voluntary, and inclusive. So the focus on those 3 standards. So if we define meaningful with those 3 standards, and then what happens, I don't know. I mean, they look at a sampling of projects in country to see.
They're meant to report on. I think they're meant to report on all projects
All
that have
project-
participation as
Elements,
as a component of the project. But they only focus on 3 out of the 9 standards, and
And do they
there's.
focus on the scope, like across the program cycle?
That's what I'm not clear on. I don't think they do.
I don't think
Can
so.
you guys, Hassan? Do you know? It's just any time at any point in the project cycle, isn't it? And even with those variables, so take out the program design and implementation variables. Even with that, it's very difficult to get good quality data.
Yeah.
So I think that there will be a real challenge with that.
Yeah. So because of those challenges, some people have said, why don't we just leave that aside and put something about people's satisfaction about their participation in the project? Again, going back to perception data.
I think this
People's
is very-
satisfaction about their information that they have, and people's satisfaction about how much and how they participated in the project. Does that?
I would like to say that this seems more appropriate rather than having our own definition. If community members, they are owning something, they say that yes, we are satisfied with our participation. It can vary into different contexts, into different projects. But if they are satisfied, that is the most important thing. And looking at this, I think it's quite challenging to measure against all these things. And what this indicator says, it is easy to measure as well.
How would we do that? It would be just a survey question again.
Yes, it will be a survey question,
Uh-huh.
but they will have some freedom.
It's like yes and no.
Yes and no, and then you can maybe add 3 or 4 questions like, do you think that you have been involved in the activities in which you wanted to participate, something like this, and then were you encouraged or it
Yeah,
was
were you
friendly,
welcomed?
something,
Yeah.
you feel that you were comfortable throughout the project, something, and if the end, the final result is if they are satisfied with their participation, then I think this covers very well.
But then,
I think the mention of this one, the safety of it and the sensitivity to risk, because I think children might not necessarily know that they were put at risk and maybe something didn't happen. But I know there's been problems with that element of the basic requirements in country programmes, so I think that's quite important.
So was your participation safe?
Yeah, but I mean, children might not necessarily know if they were put at risk, so
Yeah.
maybe it would be something around what was in place to prevent that.
I think that Hassan's idea, or I guess we've talked about satisfaction a lot, and I think to get the satisfaction indicator would be great, but I don't think it necessarily needs to or should replace this indicator. I think if
That's
we,
fine.
yeah, I think if we rephrase this indicator to be the same as the global outcome indicator, then perhaps we would get better data for both at the project level and at the country office level, and
I
people
think
will
it's
be
worth
more familiar
trying.
with that indicator, and then that would also bring out the safe element, and then we could have a different indicator that was around satisfaction. And in my mind, if we were going to do that and do it in a survey, then you could have a participatory way of developing those survey questions, as in find out what would actually satisfy people before you then put it into a survey, so that we're not kind of saying this is what would make you happy. We're finding out what would make people happy before we put it into a survey.
Yeah.
What's the wording of the global indicator? I actually don't know.
I don't know either.
Like safety, inclusivity.
Percentage of people in general involved in the project or something like this. Very general word. Isn't it?
Report. Yeah, the
Yes, who report.
participation was safe, voluntary, something like that.
Is that something that's measured, sorry for my ignorance on this, is that something that's measured at country level? Like are they, and
Country
those,
level on an annual basis.
on an annual basis, okay. And
Global indicator.
how is that done? Is that reflected into project level indicators as well? Or?
I don't know.
So with
if
all the
there's a
global outcome indicators, there was like a long process of trying to develop them,
Mm-hmm.
and then the hope was that they were, or the expectation probably more than the hope, was that then they would be used in project level log frames as much as possible, so that countries were collecting you know, one set of data. Instead of, for example, just changing the wording, like dropping one thing or changing one thing, you know, everybody would use those indicators as much as possible to relieve the burden on collecting project level data. But then also to have data that we can aggregate for country and country level.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. If that's all right, I want to kind of bring this to a close now. I appreciate your inputs and thinking around that. Watch this space. I think Zoe and I will continue working on this, and any one of you interested is most welcome to kind of continue engaging us in this discussion. I would like us to kind of really come up with, you know, 3 our country colleagues, but one of the first things. Where is it? Not moving. Oh yes, there you go. One of the first things we want you to do is basically form your team and support system in country. We do not want you to be alone in championing and implementing all of these things. You already have your full-time positions, starting to think about that, I know you have been already, is very important. And in terms of focal points, I mean, this is very, again, context specific. It's a discussion that needs to be held maybe at PDQ level to look at how best, how most strategically we can take this work forward. Who could be the focal point? Sometimes in some countries these are M&E people. In some countries it is a natural champion who already understands, gets this, and models it, who could be a program staff person. So it can be program people, and some countries have gone around and said, we will actually do one person per department, so we will not only include program or M&E people in the focal points, but we will bring in, say, your HR person, your safeguarding person, somebody from operations and finance, to look at, you know, other organizational aspects of accountability. So there's all the kind of flexibility in terms of how the country office wants to form this support structure. Interested? Oh. Okay. Playing games. Okay, so I'll show you a couple of examples of organograms. This is from Egypt. So the accountability coordinator there is already part of the SMT. And is not part of PDQ. So kind of dotted line to the PDQ group. And then what they did is they've got focal points at each field office, but they said the field manager needs to have oversight. So they're also kind of in this organogram. And they did a nice TOR for roles and responsibilities for the accountability structure in country. Can I just take one? So take a look. So the PDQ's roles and responsibilities for accountability, the coordinator's roles and responsibilities, the focal points and region-based and the project-based focal points. So these are the field managers, and the focal points responsibilities is identified. And this is part of their accountability framework. And this says this is kind of the structure who is going to implement our accountability framework. So this is an example for you to take and adjust as you have these discussions in country. Yeah? So Gloria, I know you're kind of at this point not very sure maybe about how this is going to work, but I don't know, I mean maybe you have some ideas by now. Is it a bit clearer who you want to select, for example, for focal points, who you want to suggest?
It's clearer, but I think most of the stuff I'll really sort it out because some things have been discussed on piloting, for example, the complaints and responsibilities in the two programs. Up to now, a decision is made.
Yeah, so
SMT level, the director responsible for operations.
okay. So it's
It's clearer now, but there are things that we need to do.
yeah. So and we need to discuss. Obviously, you can't know now. But again, if you want to start with a couple of projects, pilot things, then you will need focal points from those projects. And then, your SMT champion doesn't have to be the PTQ director, but it can be the operations director. So whatever is going to work, basically. This is from Niger. They have a meal coordinator at the main office, and then at regional offices, they have officers and assistants. Depending on the size of the office, I guess, they have 2 in some cases. So it's a meal structure that they've gone with, the meal thing. South Sudan, a meal lead sits in Juba, and then in area offices there's a meal manager, and then field office level there's meal coordinators. And what they've done is basically they've separated data and learning, data management. They've got separate people, like I guess in many cases, and then they report. And they've got dotted lines. And they have this MERL, what is it? Multi-evaluation, research and learning, in addition to a meal. So, sitting at Juba level. So, these are some. That's not right. This is really weird. Okay. So, the next thing I want to share is once you have your team in place, we want you to kind of get them up to speed about what we're talking about. You're going to have to train them. And we will give you, all the slides and the handouts today in soft copy form, and you take hard copies with you. But this kind of thing I shared now is a session plan. You might want to have a 2 or 3 day training on accountability all at once. Depending on the geography of your country office, you might want to have session by session. If the people are in the same office as you, perhaps session by session is easier. Whereas if you have field offices, you might have to get people in to your main office for a training, a longer training. So the facilitation notes are not very long. But I wanted to kind of keep this one short to give you a sense of, okay, so the first session is an introductory session. Can I borrow? Is there an extra one?
No.
Can I take yours? So the first one is an accountability basics session. And you start with a discussion, and then it's exactly as I ran it this week. So I hope that as you read through it, you will remember the things that we did this week, how we ran the accountability discussion, and then I presented definitions, and then we looked at quality, and then we talked about the relationship between quality and accountability. And then basically you do the self-assessment tool with them, and then you discuss. That's one session, and it's about probably 2.5 hours, so you need to have that time. Accountability to and with partners, that was yesterday we did it. The assessment tool, you can bring in your partners and then discuss and then present what needs to happen, and then present the MOU structure, which I should now give you. I've actually found it. Where is it? Gloria, can you give me that one? I was telling you, SCI is actually adopted. There's only 5, I think 6. So if you could share, that would be great. This is the SCI Partnership MOU template that has incorporated accountability sections that I handed out yesterday. so you can actually show it to and start using them, I hope. So anyway, information sharing, again, is an hour and a half. Participation is longer, but again, a 3-hour session. Complaints handling is longer, 3-hour session. You start with a discussion of current practices. You look at the nuts and bolts. If you remember, we did that rowing flip charts on the floor. And then you show the film. And then you introduce the SOP tools. Yeah? And then you do an exercise on setting up the CRM in their particular project. So try to remember as I ran them, and you've got the slides and the materials, the handouts in your folders. Accountability and proposals, maybe in 1 hour, you can have this discussion we had, you can share the excerpt, talk about budget appraisals, budgeting questions, and things like that. Accountability and staff competencies, respectful encounters film, show that and have the discussion we had afterwards. And then talk about setting objectives for accountability, the guide we have, and we can agree on it, some sort of thing. Accountability and child safeguarding. Again, you start with a discussion. Which benchmarks are related to safeguarding? And then you can hand out the safeguarding rules. What do you know? It's not always about abuse. It's also about safety and doing harm. So I've tried to lay out the key messages here. I hope that's useful. Do you think you will do like a long training, or for the country colleagues? Can I just quickly ask?
Yes.
Oh, you will have to, yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, what I have planned for Somalia program, we'll be doing a 3-day training
Okay.
on accountability
Okay. When do you want to do that?
on 11th of this month.
Oh my goodness. Right. Okay. Okay, so in terms of accountability frameworks, let's get into that and start looking at what that looks like. So throughout the week we've looked at various, we'll go into a break in 5 minutes, but bear with me, I'll just go through this quickly. An accountability framework, a country-level accountability framework is basically a work plan for the country that sets the strengths and weaknesses and things to improve, and also a structure for implementing the work plan, yeah, like the Egypt thing. And we initially thought that this work plan would need to be a more than a year, kind of 2-year, 3-year plan. It is entirely up to the country office how the time frame they want to put on the framework. Some countries have found it useful to have 2-year plans, and others said, you know what? Beyond 1 year is way too long for us, because we don't know what changes will happen. Things are changing with the transition. We just want to know year by year. So it's really entirely up to the country office. And our original tools from last year have these 3 components: the policy and systems review with SMT, which is what we looked at on Monday, the field staff self-assessment, which is what we looked at on Tuesday morning with the staff, and then the community assessment, which is the listen first thing we did for adults, and then you did some more with Hannah on Wednesday, accountability assessments with children. Do you remember all that? So you now have some of these, all of these tools, and it is basically up to you whether you will make space, whether if the country office wants this framework, then get in touch with me and we can plan. The idea is that we need to basically at least if you don't want to do this with SMT because they won't get it, because it will be too difficult, because it's already part of the MOS, that's okay. This is not terribly mandatory, but these 2 will be important to do. And for these 2 to give us a reliable picture of where things are in the country office, we will need to do some sort of a sampling. How many staff are you going to have the assessment do? How many communities are you going to do the community assessment? So if you want to put together your framework, get in touch with me and I have guidance on that, and we can decide. Yeah. So just as an example, this is the guidance, the template for the framework. So you have it. And this is an example draft framework that's not complete from Bangladesh. Okay, so if you look at this with me, say, go to page 2, benchmark 2, staff competencies. Yeah? You will see on the left-hand side findings from the 3 exercises. There's space for findings from the 3. Yeah? So this is where those findings go into strengths and then action needed. And then the rest is fairly self-explanatory, the time frame, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this is basically the template. And we decided to put in actually a RAG status, red, amber, green, to indicate, you know, at the time of the completion of the framework, this is where we are. And then at the end of the year, you might go back and say, we've done this, tick, tick, tick. And then we might want to change our status. So this is what the framework template looks like. There's a budget at the end of it for the estimated costs of implementing it. And at the end of that budget thing, you can basically look at, you know, you charge from XYZ budgets or you charge to your accountability breakthrough budget. So it shows, and some countries have actually gone ahead and filled in the budget too, and they said for the next 2 years we're going to spend, I don't know, 300,000 or something, and they will come from the existing project budgets plus the accountability budget, and that's a nice thing to see. So that's it. And the Bangladesh one is for your information. We might be using it in the next session. So thank you for your attention. Time for break. Information sharing ideas here. And if you like any of them, put them down and then think from your experience some other quick wins and nice ideas for mainstreaming improved information sharing. And then we'll move you on. And we've got about basically 25 minutes for this. So, what are some of your favorite ideas? Anything new? Anything that strikes you as especially a quick win?
For me, I think produce newsletter bulletin on a quarterly basis to Save the Children website, as well as Facebook and Twitter.
Bulletin on?
Yeah, because like in Kenya program, we are having community newsletters that we normally produce on a monthly basis about the program.
A bulletin for the community?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen in Roger they do it.
Yeah.
Actually, it came from quite conflictual relations with the community. The community didn't like us, and we were trying to think, oh my God, how are we going to fix this? And they tried a few strategies a couple of years ago, and these community bulletins were one of them. I'm not sure how things are at the moment, but yeah, it's a nice idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, it came to my mind, this idea that we received a newsletter from Jasmine.
Right.
About different components. So if in that newsletter, if there is a portion on accountability across countries, automatically it will, yeah.
Raise the profile. We've got to ask Jasmine, now that she's the accountability champion, she might want to do it actually. Okay. Any others?
Yes, for the staff competencies, I was thinking that there are other organizations who want to do the same, so we can explore some of the opportunities with them for joint, maybe some technical training, some sort of these things, so that will help us to.
Okay. Yeah.
Just generally, I felt like some of them were easier to do for quick wins than others. Like information sharing, you just like have to like even if you do it like once at the start of the project, it's better than not doing it at all.
Yeah.
Like it would be a lot easier for people who are a little bit cautious about it to start with information sharing and possibly like launching evaluation and learning because they already do those activities anyway. You know? So that just struck me that some seemed a lot easier to have quick wins than others.
Absolutely. In the end, we end up doing. Yeah, I mean, can I borrow one of the things that my favorites are, I think, you know, the information sharing package. When we talk about how do we make this systematic across the board, that can be a simple tool. And if we actually say, okay, we'll try to use this in every project, that's a way of mainstreaming. Boom, easily. One person does it. Every program officer gets a copy. It's their resource, and copies are left in the community. That's a quick win. And we can see if it works, yeah? Another quick win is including feedback from communities as an agenda item in program meetings. Please do that. Can I please ask you to champion that? If it becomes a part of the agenda, if when we sit with the partners, we ask them this question. So what are we hearing from the community this month or this quarter? If we include that section in the program report and that actually gets written down, that's a quick win. And as we ask this question, it will become way of working, culture. That's it. That's a quick win. Please do that. So in the meetings and in the reporting templates, starting with the partner, setting up a system for the partner. That may not be a quick win, but it's a prerequisite for this work. And also even starting with our own staff. So I'd like you to explore, can we have a system for the staff, with HR, with the senior management? Can we have a system for partners? And then we go on to communities. Including objective on accountability and staff performance plans. Accountability into proposals. Let's see if that's a quick win. Now that we've got these excerpts, we will have indicators, and we have these budget appraisal questions. Every new proposal that's going to be written in your country office, can you get in there to say, I've got these tools, can these be please used? Yeah, and then we see, once it's in the proposal, let's see what happens. Yeah? So those are my favorites. Any other questions? Okay, so this is when we actually look into thinking specifically about your plans. This is just a format we put together that is largely for country offices, and it's by quarter. Yeah, so it helps you think about in a timely fashion. If this format doesn't help you now, just make a list of what you want to do. So let me put it like this. For country colleagues, I would like you to put your breakthrough application in front of you and think about these ideas we've been discussing. Do you want to add things? Do you want to change things from, bringing discussions from this week? And then start thinking about a time order. What can I realistically do in the quarter one, quarter two, etc. If you can make a start on that now, that would be great. For colleagues in our head office, if you can come up with a few bullet points for me as to what you want to take forward with what you've gotten from this week, and then if you can kind of email them to me. We may not have the time to discuss them here, but I'd actually like to kind of continue that conversation along with Hannah. So email me and Hannah, if you would, and we will take that forward with you over email or somehow over lunch. So we've got, about half an hour to complete this. I will, after that, we'll look at the week and we'll kind of do an evaluation of the week. And then we'll go for lunch. You're invited for lunch to join us at the TAS restaurant, so we'll walk over. We'll need your help cleaning up and emptying this room as quickly as we can after the evaluation, if that's all right. Is that right, Pekka? And then we'll walk over. And after lunch, I'm going to continue sitting with my country colleagues a little bit to discuss their plans.
After lunch.
After lunch. Is that all right?
No, I should be getting.
You should be leaving what time?
No, they see.
Day 3 is also going to be less likely. This is the evaluation, so I'm going to take the end of the shift. Do you remember how day 3 went? In some sort of order?
Yeah.
So that can be around
Yeah,
here. Yeah, so let's get sorry. Okay, what do we have from, well, we didn't really use a lot of, and I think we can put this one. Listen first is in day 2. And then day 5. Yeah. Oh, we put day 5 there. Yeah, this is day 5. Oh, yeah. That's it there. Yeah. Where should we put?
Was that day 2?
Day 2, yeah. In the morning.
We've been so busy, maybe we should put them by Catherine's.
Day 2 up here. All right, let's gather around and take a quick look at all the things that we covered in the week. Shall we? Starting with day 2, just step on them, it's okay. Day 1, why start with day 2? Can you see? Half day. We started with some of the HAP standard. And we did staff field assessment tool discussion. And as part of it was, we looked at participation across the program cycle for us, how it's happening for adults and children, our impression of it. So that was the end of day 1. Day 2, we started with listen first questions. Listen first assessment of community's impression, basically, of our accountability. And there were 6 questions. We divided you up into men and women's groups, and we gave you 20 stickers and asked you 6 questions, and you voted, and we had a discussion. You remember? And then we went into basically complaints handling. And one of the first things we did was the nuts and bolts. So these 5 flip charts: benefits of complaints handling, barriers, types of complaints, entry points, who can complain. We did a quick discussion to cover the basics of complaints handling. Then we watched a movie, we looked at the tools, the SOP tools, and then the next thing we looked at the SOP tools, including the categories, the flow chart, the 10 steps to complaints handling and all that. And then we asked you to design your own. And here is Catherine's Pena CRM with the little community groups and the field officers and the accountability officer sitting at the head office. So that was the, huh?
Somalia programs here.
Where's Somalia?
Is that Do you want me to talk it
Yes,
through?
yes. What did
Stop
you do?
eating a chocolate biscuit then.
Sorry. Okay, so we started the day by, so it's not on here, but we talked a lot about kind of the strategic context, rights context, making sure that we defined participation, remember the elevator pitch, and having to talk about it, and being a real champion for participation, and the balance of power. And then we talked about the basic requirements for effective and ethical practice, and we did the activity looking at the case studies and evaluating those, and then we talked about how we might put those into practice. And then we did the program cycle, walking around the room, which I found really interesting, hearing all of your different experiences of how you can involve children at different points. And then we had quite a big discussion, didn't we, I remember, about, you know, remaining positive and how to kind of overcome barriers. And then we, after lunch, did running the accountability assessment. So we did the program cycle activity and the pots and beans and the complaint story, and thought about creative ways to make those child-friendly. And then I did a short presentation looking at M&E and how children can be involved in M&E. And then we had a great session at the end exploring challenges and solutions, looking at these kind of what are the main challenges we face, and then coming up with some solutions about those 4 priority areas. And then that was the end of the day, I think. Yeah, so we did a lot.
Yeah. Day 4, we don't have flipcards for. Started with information sharing. Hassan did a very interesting presentation. Great discussion. Very interesting, I thought. Then accountability and partnership. We did the assessment. We looked at accountability and partnership agreements and things like that. And then we watched the movie from Myanmar. And we had a very nice discussion about staff competencies for accountability. Bill was like, not humbleness, modesty. I'm glad I came. And then we had Christine looking at the relationship between accountability and child safeguarding. And that, I thought, was a very good discussion. And then today. We started with accountability and proposals, the excerpt, the budgeting questions, and then the indicators discussion. And then we did the quick wins for each of the action planning. And then now you've been thinking about your individual action plans. Yeah? So that's a quick reminder of all the things we did during this week. And now we want to ask you, I'm actually really tempted.
Everyone's smile, please.
What are we doing now?
I'll take one.
Yeah,
Just spot.
I'll take one.
Thank you.
Should I take one with you, Anna?
Email it to us.
That's fine. No.
Oh,
That's it, can't see. Hang on.
We can move to the
Yes,
Go
right.
down.
Yes.
I don't drink this.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Thanks.
That's lovely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Very good.
Colleen, so who is able to join us to the restaurant? Oh, no.
Oh, I'll come.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Great.
I have a Skype.